Eric, we have to. I. What's another? We can't call it controversy. We can't. Okay, because it has a negative connotation to it. So
Hmm.
what should we call it?
Well, some might call it a stumbling block,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
I think as we're going to find out from this episode, all stumbling blocks are stepping stones. So we can initially discuss it as a stumbling block, and people will
Right.
see how it's actually probably the best mistake we ever made.
Yeah. I've heard people call it a complete shit show, but I wouldn't say that
Hmm.
personally. So as everyone, of course, by now knows, the muscle and strength pyramids that Eric Helms authored that are a fantastic resource for any lifter trying to increase their lifting knowledge and also just have practical tools in order to better enable their actualization of their goals, which is kind of our topic today. Everyone should have that. Recently, they were translated, I believe, into Mandarin, which is awesome. They're also, Eric, translated into Spanish. What are the other languages they're translated in?
They're available in Spanish, Italian, and like you said, they are now available in Mandarin.
And let me just say sincerely, congratulations, because I do think they are a monumental work for the lifting community. Some would almost say a true pyramid that people can gaze upon from far and wide and really stand the test of time. Once we're long gone, you know, we know what is going to happen to us. We don't have to say it out loud and who and Paimon and all those things.
Mm, mm,
Um,
mm.
but there are those that take issue. See, I'm very hesitant because I know the legalese speak. I don't want to stumble.
Listen, man, I'm confident. I've spoken to my lawyers,
Yeah.
and by that I mean I've had deep conversations in my own head with myself.
Right.
And the lawsuit that I filed, and by that I mean I sent a harshly worded email to egypt@gmail.com.
Right.
So, but more or less, my lawyer contacted the government of Egypt
Right.
and said, "Hey, you owe us royalties on any tourism that occurs to Egypt for use of the pyramids,
Right.
because I've got a copyright in my book.
Yeah.
It's now,
I saw that
I
big C,
mean,
bro.
yeah, I mean, to be honest, I released that first video in 2012. So you're telling me
Yeah.
that Egypt can claim something about the pyramids before 2012? Like, I'm no history buff,
Yeah.
okay? But that seems like an awful long time ago. You couldn't even get some of the smartphones that are out on the market now back then. There wasn't even, mass use of Instagram back then.
No.
So if you're trying to claim Egypt, and my lawyer has told me probably not to talk about this live, but I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And again, that's, conversations with myself. If you're telling me that, I think that's just so like flagrantly incorrect
Right.
that I think it's just obvious. And for those who are all asking, hey, have you received an email back from Egypt@gmail? No, and that tells me they're on the run. They know I've got something to say. They're suppressing the truth, and it's just a matter of time before Egypt owes me, 8 years worth of
Back pay.
royalties on
Yeah.
back. Exactly. So yeah.
Eric, I don't want to say that they're malicious in terms of what they're doing. All I'll say is that the Sphinx is definitely above 20% body fat, and that's clear to everyone. And there have been rumblings. Of course, the ancient Mayan civilizations, Aztec. They also have. Some have said almost pyramid-like structures, and I've even heard rumbling. I'm just wondering, finally, if you could comment on ancient Sumeria, the ziggurats. I've heard that they actually are considering legal action against you. It just seems like, I don't know, man. The more you rise, Eric, like the more you gain notoriety, respect in the community. That these nations are kind of coming after you, right?
I got two words.
Mm,
Haters.
right. Yeah. Emphasis.
That's it.
Oh,
With a Z,
that's the
by the
statement.
way. That's it. I think that makes it pretty clear.
Okay. Yeah. I think you said everything you need to
And
say.
hold on, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. There's
Go.
one more thing I want to say.
Yep.
We all know what haters gonna do.
Haters gonna hate.
Yes. And if that isn't legal precedent, then I don't know what is. So, in a statement that I would like to make to the whole Iron Cult, if you see countries hating, because that's what haters do,
Right.
on my pyramids, just hashtag copyright pyramids Eric Helms 2012. It's an easy one to remember, and then put at the country, and we'll just beat him with the groundswell movement. I think,
Eric, they've been put on notice, and we maybe set our sights too small before with the sexual health
Mm,
podcast. Um,
mm.
and in fact, at some point we will read some of the reviews. I'll let you talk in a little bit. And I want to read one particular review that was quite positive. But let me just say that today I just feel that you're very close to me in this episode, that our goals are very close, that they're very similar. And I personally, and this is a true story, you're one of the few Instagram stories that I will check out on a regular basis because, one, as I said before, I'm interested in your goals. I like to see you succeed in everything that you do. And it was fantastic to see you in now, 2019, which seems like a long time ago, compete at one of your shows, and just the package condition, the focus, everything, your sportsmanship. It's great to see. When you succeed, Eric, I'm happy. And so me seeing you now weightlift, we're not going to reveal the location, but let's just call it, what is it called? The Basement of Champions? What are you calling it now?
I'm going to call it the Citadel of Iron.
Whew. Oh, wow. Wow. I can't tell you how in I am for that name. FYI.
Yeah, so short for that is COI. So
Oh, okay. COI. Yep. No, that makes sense. What I want to say, Eric, is that I saw you do that weightlifting, and boy, is it looking good. And we kind of were having a conversation on how over time there's a multitude of goals, almost as you lift more and more for a longer period of time. Not that your goals shift, but they expand, right? The total amount of goals that you have, the directions you want to pursue. Let's face it, all of us, maybe we want to improve our self-image, our body image. It might be more aesthetics focused, and then maybe it branches out. Maybe we do a little powerlifting, weightlifting, strongman, a variety of other sports. But when all this happens, how do we best approach all these goals? And is there such a thing where we talked about, I think, off here, what was it? The conscious competence model, where over time, almost the path is always the same, but we level up, so to speak. And it seems to me, and that's why, not that haters are going to hate, once again, Eric, but because there is that chasm between the beginner, the novice, and then the advanced lifter, let's say, and they'll take a look at the person. It's like, oh, they say it's easy, and to the advanced lifter at that point, like you, I won't speak for you, but you said that your prep last year was, I think, easier than a few of the other ones before, and you're not saying that prepping is easy overall, but you've been leveling up in this game, D&D style. We're not now on level 4 stone skin. We've leveled up to however high in the game it goes. And so for you, it might feel easier, but it's still a hard path. And that's the point, is that you get better over time. And so maybe this episode is from two guys that have been around since, I'm just going to say it, Frank Zane. We've been in the lifting game a long time, my man. How to best go about achieving all your goals. So kind of almost a meta conversation.
no, I think that's a great way to frame it. The conscious competence model, for those who don't know, is kind of just a way of framing learning in general, where you go from unconscious incompetence. You're not doing it right. You don't even know you're not doing it right. That's how much of undeveloped you are in given skill.
Yeah.
The next level is the very frustrating level of conscious incompetence, where you're doing it wrong, and you know you are, but you don't have the power to change that. And then there's the stage where I think a lot of lifters, especially in the evidence-based community, get stuck. And I don't just mean in the way they think about their diet, their nutrition, the way they're programming, but I mean on a higher level, because they confuse knowledge with experience, and they kind of pit them against each other almost. The final level, where they get stuck rather, is conscious competence. I'm focused, I'm doing things, I'm actively applying things, and that's a necessary period. But eventually where you want to get to is unconscious competence. Like you said, no one would ever say a snatch isn't a difficult movement to master or to do right. But the high caliber weightlifters, not even necessarily really competitive, but the ones who've been doing it for years, are technically proficient regardless of their strength levels. They do that 5 times to up to 10 times a week, and they don't necessarily have to think about every little thing when they do it. It is such an ingrained thing they do. Now, when you're in that conscious competence phase, and I'm going to get a little meta now, when you have to think, oh, I need to hit X number of grams of protein. Oh, I need to get X servings of fruit per day. Oh, I need to make sure that I drink this gallon of water every day. Oh, I got to make sure I schedule my training. Oh, I need to write my new program and think about, oh, what's this thing this guy said, and who's this influencer I follow, or what's that principle I learned in a book? Oh, I got to get it all perfect. Oh, I got to do this with my sleep, this, that. When you have this huge cognitive load of all the things that you have to do, that takes space, that takes energy, and there's only so much you can handle. And there's actually, arguably, a detriment to trying to carry so many things at the same time and master so many domains that are going to ultimately impact what you're trying to do. And even in the crowd, I would say, that is the most likely and most obsessive to try to do that all at the same time and to hashtag optimize everything, bodybuilders are the ones who you start to see the negative side effects of doing that. They're the ones who experience higher levels of anxiety. We've got data on this. They're the ones who experience post-competition binging. Some of that's biological. Some of that's just kind of the cultural way that bodybuilders would traditionally diet, and it can be modified. But you were talking about my prep experience. When so many of these things become automatic, when you don't have to track food to the same degree of precision, when you can eyeball things and get an idea of portion sizes, when you have a structure of eating that you've been following for a decade, when you just do things instead of having to plan them, and they are in a well-regimented, planned manner, but without effort, because it's just the way your lifestyle is, that removes that cognitive burden and allows you to focus on other things. In a meta sense, since I'm someone who has relatively broad goals, I'm interested in pretty much anything related to the iron game, this effectively allows me to build a broader base and have certain things that I don't have to put forth cognitive effort or even the same degree of physical effort, which we can talk about, to maintain while I expand other domains. And it can allow me to level up in new areas faster than I would have if I was trying to do it differently or too early or try to take on too much all at once. So I think we can expand on that as we dive further, but I think that's probably a helpful understanding for the listener to get an idea of what exactly we're talking about.
Whew. Eric, when you said individuals that pit knowledge versus experience, and sometimes it must be said that there is no shortcut towards experience you have to undergo in order to gain that perspective or the greater perspective. And often, I mean, I made, because those videos, Eric, they be popping on YouTube, 7 mistakes I made, what I wish I knew. It's like, you know what though, the path towards where I am currently, if it wasn't for some of those pitfalls or for some of those experiences, I wouldn't have to reframe or rethink things, retool it in order to come back. There's only so much that you can understand but not apply. There's so much that must be applied, and then it can be understood, if that makes sense. And so I think this lifting journey, as long as you kind of keep moving forward and you have a little bit of introspection, self-awareness, and we're using kind of some video game analogies where we talk about min-maxing. So the concept, or when people talk about in business, ROI, the return on investment. It's like, what can I do right now that will actually yield a positive return? Because I think there's a certain level of, I don't know if I would say neuroticism, but just obsessiveness that is natural to some of these pursuits where you want to be the best, right? It's like you're doing this, you enjoy it, but also there's that thrill of excelling at such a high level. And so you start getting very granular with the details. Is that actually making a profound difference? And that's why I do want to take a very brief pause. And Eric, you'll see exactly why after I read the review. I'll explain when we talk about you actually being instrumental for flexible dieting and what that and how that shaped honestly the community. And then we could go on from there where we talk about the physical qualities that you said, having those broad goals. But very quickly, I want to read a review that an Iron Cult member left. We always love hearing feedback on iTunes, and maybe we'll start doing this not on a regular basis. We can't. The only thing that's regular here is just the fact that we're here every single Monday from now to the end of time until the pyramids, crumble. Which, guess what? The muscle and strength pyramids, timeless. Anyways, this individual's name is Myron Tan, which is a fantastic name. Sounds like a great guy. And he gave 5 stars to the Iron Cult podcast, said highly recommended. And he said, where do I start? This dynamic duo hits it out of the park. Sex with Emily is hands down the most in-depth podcast about getting in touch with your feminine side. The information and discussions in this podcast are second to none. Simply invaluable if you need to unleash the fiery sexual energy that is bubbling inside your soul. Elbows are just the right angle and level of pointiness. 10 out of 10 would bang. And so I just want to thank the people that leave these comments. I do want to say, and Eric, now you'll understand, my friend, Myron actually is an old friend of mine from probably 8 or 9 years. And Myron, I bring it up because this boy is probably going to be listening. he was one of the individuals that applied. This is no joke, Eric. This is how it comes full circle. And you don't know how it's going to come, but it's coming. The train's coming. Flexible dieting principles, where he was someone that was lifting, I think, so around my same age, was lifting for a while, and then found out about flexible dieting. So going from being needlessly restrictive with the food choices. So like most young guys, myself included, wanted to get some muscle, wanted to also get lean. And I'm honestly blanking. I think his was Shredded by Cereal was his Instagram account. Now this is way before the whole onset, like the onslaught, Eric, of all these like, food kind of porn Instagram accounts. But he was an early adopter of the flexible dieting lifestyle. He definitely listened to a lot of stuff that you said. And from making some of these subtle changes, talking about return on investment, this is no joke. My man got actually he got shredded to the point, Eric, that it made me realize in 2012, this is probably, I'm getting probably the dates wrong here, early 2012, I want to say, that it was possible. Not that I suspected anyone else wasn't natural, but to know one of my friends, to know himself, his character, and to see him make that radical transformation, I thought to myself, like, damn, okay, so calories. Yeah, I guess calories are way more important than the 7 holy foods you're supposed to choose, huh? And so he made this fantastic transformation, but his level of effort, you almost can argue, was less in the sense that once he restructured his paradigm towards him now, okay, it's not 7 foods I need to choose. It's about the calories, protein requirements would be higher, and then just adhering to this for a long enough period of time to have a sustainable sort of physique development will yield the biggest return. So his effort wasn't necessarily more, but the way that he approached things was better, and then he got more results. So almost what we talked about there, the leveling up, so the competence increasing. So as soon as he kind of unlocked the science, so to speak, so he had a better positioning, the navigation for his ship towards his destination, it became easier.
If I may,
Yes.
and first off, thank you, Myron. If I may, I have a feeling, though, that it wasn't just necessarily the knowledge and understanding that, it's actually the manipulation of energy balance, and I should probably pay attention to my macros, maybe particularly protein. And once I figure out kind of the appropriate numerical values, everything's fixed. I think we've talked about this before multiple times in Iron Culture. We've had discussions of the difference between flexible dieting and counting macros. We had Lauren Conlon on to talk about her research in the area. We talked about with Gabby and a number of others. I think what's really interesting is that some people fail miserably with counting macros if it fits your macros and it has a negative impact on them. And this could be self-caused, or it could be due to a quote-unquote macro coach who is just someone who basically uses a calculator and gives them numbers and says, hey, this is flexible dieting. And someone who does not have a certain habit-based lifestyle around eating, someone who is not structured their life around maybe even incorrect ideas about food, but maybe they had a certain structure, maybe they had a certain understanding, maybe they had developed habits. When you have that background and understanding, and then you go, oh, wow, I missed this key piece like energy balance, absolutely. You can start to finally see progress where before you were making errors. But if you don't have that piece, now all of a sudden, there's this whole level of experience you have to get that knowledge doesn't give you. And it's just like if you read a book about riding a bike, you wouldn't be able to hop on a bike and ride it, and that's, it's not a perfect analogy because that's a motor skill, but I think we can think of, yes, all analogies are imperfect, but I think we can think of many things that parallel that. Until you actually do something, you start to realize all these little factors. So I think in the kind of the nutrition world, what you will often see with bodybuilders who come to the sport without necessarily having any kind of healthy, quote unquote, nutrition or eating lifestyle before it, it really goes off the rails after the competition because they've instituted this new thing for 3 to 6 months. And then once that goal is over, they don't have a need to eat like that. In fact, everything in their body and their mind wants them not to eat like that and to gain weight and to eat all those forbidden foods, quote unquote. It just goes off the rails and they can get extremely depressed, see their physique fade immediately. And it can be quite difficult. So I think this is an example of understanding these key pieces of knowledge is one way of leveling up, but without the experiential part, it's really not only not that valuable, potentially harmful. And I think that's an example of understanding research or hearing a tidbit of a study without understanding how to position research or how to integrate it. If I've seen people, and actually Terrence talked about this when we had him on last, some people will not try to train a certain way unless it's been research based. Whether that's ignorance of history or just fear based or just a lack of common sense of seeing people are making gains on a multitude of programs, thinking that there is an optimal way to train rather than understanding the principles and applying them to themselves to create something optimal for their context. And I think that's the kind of thing we're talking about, where you get these pieces of knowledge, you build the experience, and all of a sudden that platform widens, and now you have a larger base to build a higher pyramid on. Copyright Eric Helms, Andrea Valdez, and Andy Morgan, 2015.
Yeah, it's first pyramid and only pyramid that matters. You heard it here first. Eric, I have to say something, and that is, we throw these references because a lot of these episodes are memorable for both of us. And I'm thinking of Chip Conrad in particular when he talked about the fitness industrial complex. And I'm not, so some people, once again, so we're considering the title Critiques of Capitalism. And some might say that we don't place enough of an emphasis on the individual, that we're almost collectivist, that we're blaming systems and structures and not putting enough responsibility on the individual. But it must be noted, and we speak as people that have that experience, being personal trainers, that part of the fitness industrial complex is sort of predicated on making you feel like you don't possess the knowledge or the right type of knowledge. And sort of the strategy of your typical personal trainer model is to make the lifter feel incompetent, to make the client feel continuously incompetent. So there's some sort of ceiling. So they learn a little bit. So you're like, Eric, bro, your knees are caving in on the squat. Okay, where do I begin? Your knees are caving. Okay, we're going to need 4 to 6 weeks. This valgus. Okay, we're going to need to work on the. Okay, so we got this. Oh, your descent. Eric, he's dive bombing it. Okay, now we're going to need another 8 weeks. And so it's this continuous structure that will basically never make you competent in their eyes. And in ways, that's sort of marketing. Marketing, in essence, part of marketing, careful, some people are like, what are you talking about marketing? Is to almost make you feel incompetent, right? That you are not enough in some sort of capacity. And so if you can't discern between good information, bad information, misinformation, and how ubiquitous this information is coming at you, like you can look at a magazine, you can look at the TV, you can look at online, it's understandable that people have this confusion, right? That's one thing I would say that, and we've spoken before about trying to develop a more critical thinking and what that looks over time, and the pitfalls also of suddenly finding someone where a lot of the stuff starts clicking in guruism. But it must be noted, I just want to say before we go on, that I think it's very understandable. And that's why I go back to the example of at least myself, that a lot of mistakes I made, were they, easy mistakes to avoid? Sure. But over time, it was on that path, on that pyramid, the stepping stone towards the ascendancy that would later occur. And I think not enough respect is sometimes paid to the journey. So I just wanted to share that because I think sometimes individuals also think, man, I was an idiot. Can you believe that I thought that? I'm like, actually, yeah, I can believe you thought that. Like, that's kind of that was the prevailing wisdom at the time. Like, can you believe I thought about peri-workout nutrition? I'm like, well, you're not researching it. Like, it's parroting information down from one person to another. It kind of sounds like it might be logically sound. So yeah, you're going to buy into it.
Yeah, I think there's actually like 3 things at play here. To kind of carry on to the first thing that you said, or what you were largely talking about there, and something that you have talked about before, decreasing the knowledge asymmetry. I know that's kind of like your little personal mission statement. I sounded like belittling there. That's your little personal mission statement. No,
it's not a pyramid, Omar, but it's a mission statement.
I mean, it's up there. Yeah,
it's a sphinx.
It's a thing. Yeah, but I think that's ultimately what we're both trying to do. And I think that element of marketing that you said, which is basically leveraging the fear of missing out or the thing you've missed, that becomes less and less effective, that marketing strategy, the more that knowledge asymmetry is decreased. And I want to say Greg Knuckles recently posted about this on his Facebook. He was talking about how that's just something he's never been comfortable doing, even though it's a popular marketing strategy. I could be misremembering this. I was scrolling mindlessly because of the giant of Facebook forcing me to do that, and there's no such thing as personal responsibility. Anyway, I remember that people were commenting, and they're like, that's never really worked for me. And I this just could be total bullshit, but I think that's become a more recent thing as there are more people sharing more information And people can just see many, 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 many more examples of success occurring despite not knowing one of the 1,000 secrets that are absolutely necessary to make any gains. I think that just becomes so much more see-through. And so I think that's one piece. Another piece, I think, is that in the kind of evidence-based community, and I've talked about this before, a lot of the times there are unforeseen side effects of doing good things. I think this is really well shown in politics. Anytime someone passes a law or does something that ultimately has good intentions, there's often some side effects that we don't expect. And it leads to other things or other loopholes, or it causes issues and it's used in a way that wasn't the original intention. But we see it in all kinds of things in life. So in the evidence-based community, because we've said, you know what, we really need to use empiricism and rational skepticism to make these decisions, so it's not just all based on tradition and we're not just repeating the mistakes of the past or doing things suboptimally without knowing it. I think we emphasize that you need to accrue knowledge so much that it's wrong to have the wrong knowledge rather than a learning opportunity, like you were talking about. And we also emphasize that third phase of the conscious competence model, conscious competence, way too much, and it pervades into everything. Like if you see a lot of the folks in the evidence-based community, like the IPF, how many times are they yelling like 14 cues at a lifter in the middle of lifting? Because it's like you have to be thoughtful, thinking about it, knees out, back straight, hips, whatever the hell that means, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And like you said as well, like, here's this ridiculous spreadsheet I'm going to give you where you have to micromanage 45 things. And it's so difficult to carry that cognitive burden and to think about all those things, to actually be able to be present and truly integrate that knowledge into changed behavior and new habits. And it's more like I have to tick all these boxes every single day, and it becomes burdensome. And a very normal thing you'll see is that people new to tracking macros, once a season is over, they'll pull it right out. And that's kind of an earlier phase before someone who then gets to the point where they don't even really need to track that much at all during prep. So there's nothing to pull away from because they don't have to carry that cognitive burden. And that was kind of my experience in this recent prep. So the third thing that's going on now, so I talked about kind of the side effect of the evidence-based community, how there is a change in the way that marketing strategy of fear of missing out is starting to go away. The third thing, I think, is just people who are really, really motivated and they want to have it all right now. And I think people are at the point now where they get that they can't look like a pro bodybuilder in 6 months. That is another thing that's starting to die away because of that decrease in the asymmetry of knowledge. The whole put 30 pounds on your bench in six weeks from taking this pill is starting to go away. I think people see through that. But I think, unfortunately, that's the only domain of what they think is different between an advanced lifter and a beginner lifter. They think, if I just do everything that they do and wait 10 years, I'll look like them, or I'll be the equivalent of that for myself, which isn't untrue. But they're also forgetting that 10 years of being in the game does not just change you physically. There's a two-way street there. That physical change requires lifestyle changes. It requires reframing. It requires understanding what it is to be injured and stay in it, work around it, come back, have a layoff, come back to it, redefine your relationship with it, figure out what truly is valuable to you, integrate it with your life, have some relationship conflicts because you're too obsessed with it, come back to it. All of these things lead to what you see in the output of someone who has an incredible physique or is incredibly strong and is kind of maxed out their quote unquote potential. But we don't value it that way. What we think is, all right, here's their bag of tricks. I just need to make that my bag of tricks, or maybe not theirs. Like, let's say you're kind of evidence-based minded. Sweet, let me just accrue all the knowledge, the various things that make #optimal reality for me, and I'll just do it all. And I think a much more realistic and arguably beneficial approach is to think, okay, what kind of cognitive burden can I handle right now that'll enable me to shift those from that third phase of conscious competence into becoming unconscious? How do they become lifestyle habits that I just do now, and then I onboard the next few? And I think that's something that very few people do. They try to do it all at once because they want optimal gains. But ironically, trying to do it all at once prevents them from actually being able to integrate even a handful of these things. They're trying to do it all simultaneously. It's kind of a meta fail of multitasking.
A meta fail. I like that. There is a question I'm going to ask you at the end of this, but I do want to note one thing that I think absolutely, Eric, compared to when we first started lifting, that notion, the myth that, oh yeah, like Arnold, one, that I'm not saying that you can't naturally, like there's an outlier once again that can look like Arnold, but just the expectations, I think they've become a lot more realistic over time. I've shared this before, but I don't think this would be a common experience because, of course, everyone shares their life on Instagram. The algorithms, they run our lives. And so you start posting a little fitness photo, you put hashtag fitness, you're going to start slowly falling into the fitness community. You'll find some of these videos, blah, 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 percolate your knowledge. Cool. But when we started, this is no joke, genuinely, because again, the message boards, there's a little this, little that. I saw Pumping Iron, I saw Arnold. I'm like, hey, cool. So what? That's like 4 or 5 years of training. And I was completely naive, entered it as an outsider. Later joined Mesh's forums. There wasn't as easy, like, oh, just Google search, all these things. And so when I got my body fat, I remember this. It was at an Extreme Fitness on the Danforth, so in Toronto here. And Eric, I was 215 pounds. I went from 145 to 215. And honestly, I thought to myself, okay, so Arnold stepped on stage around whatever 215 or whatever the amount would be. Right, so I'm like 7% more than him. It's like, ugh. So, right, I'm a little shorter than him, like carry the mat, so I'm a few weeks out. And the worst part is, not that I should, it's now defunct, so I feel comfortable saying the company and the fitness business. But the person, their main function, Eric, is to sell you training or sell you like on the notion, like the memberships. And so when I told her, like, yeah, I just watched Pumping Iron, like this was all very new to me. I want to look like Arnold. This is my body. She's like, yeah, you're whatever. She said 23% body fat. That's way too low for what I was. Like, honest. So straight. So one, they're lying to you in terms of like, yeah, like you're not that overweight. Like you only need to do this. And she set up an action plan where like, you have to join the gym for at least a year. Like, of course, it's just to sell memberships. But when I told her, and this is an experienced person, it's just a sales tactic. Like, yeah, about Arnold. She wasn't like, oh, no, that's, like, impossible. Not that I want someone to, rain on someone's parade. But she's like, yeah, like, so what? Like, probably you keep lifting inside maybe a few years. I was like, now that I hear that, if someone was to tell you, like, Arnold, you're a beginner, Eric, you're a beginner. Like, yeah, I want to look like Arnold, and you tell me that. I'm not going to be like, yeah, man, so what? It's going to be another 12 months, 18 months, and then you'll be good. It's just like the duplicitous
year and
nature.
A half to your first Olympia win, and then the next 6 will come over the next couple months.
Right,
one per year after that. Yeah.
The level of knowledge asymmetry at that time was atrocious, right? And there was no, sure, you could look online and piece through the information, but this is someone who is apparently a qualified professional. This is a business that is not in ill repute, right? It's in good standing. So you join there. This is the person looks in shape. There's no immediate flags in the system to you, right? Unless you want to do a second check. But my question for you, for those that are kind of in that consciously competent in a few different ways, but they have that cognitive burden, what do you think are some of the key qualities, traits, or things to develop so you could slowly offload some of that cognitive burden? Like, what do you think occurs? You've been a coach now for quite some time. You've coached some very high-level athletes. You've also experienced this yourself. What do you think kind of happens where that, it's almost a transfiguration, like an ascendancy to a next plane of existence, where once you achieve that, and we were talking about that, the physical side of things, where for us right now, like you said, yeah, I could not bench for a long period of time, but like kind of, I get back at it, 300 pounds is within earshot within a few weeks, guaranteed. Or once you have those qualities where for yourself, the dietary adherence, sure, it might waver over time. There might be some fluctuation, but there's a certain baseline that you've leveled up to where you don't now have to consciously think of it. So I guess the question for you is, how does one go, not globally, but let's say in part, towards that unconscious competence that is very necessary maybe for long-term guaranteed success, if there's such a thing?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I can say long-term guaranteed success, but I think setting yourself up for the ability to succeed and creating the environment to grow.
Yep.
I think that's a good way to look at it, because like you said, honestly, and I don't mean this as disparaging or nihilistic, but within a handful of years of hard training, you can make 2/3 to 3/4 of your gains that you will ever make if you stay drug free. Some people get discouraged by that, But I think people forget that the difference between someone who's made 60 to 75% of their gains and someone who's made, the 95%, and they're now in that kind of asymptote kind of journey for the rest of their adult life, is striking, because it's so rare. And I think much like 5 years of consistency can get you the vast majority of your gains, it doesn't necessarily require huge lifestyle changes. It just requires a handful of years of consistency with the big rocks only. Train progressively, 3 days a week at least. Consume a surplus and a deficit appropriately. Eat enough protein. Of course, take creatine. And I have to say that because I'm on a podcast with Omar, boom. And like a handful of other things that we can all think of, get sufficient sleep, manage your stress like a functioning adult, and it's really nothing special. And you can develop a pretty special physique from consistency alone. However, the things that you have to do, if you look at it from not having the paradigm we've talked about to get to the higher level, can seem almost insurmountable when it really comes down to it. You can't even measure progress over months anymore. You have to set up training plans and accept the fact that you're just going to kind of be hovering around at what seems like maintenance, and you might push really, really hard and not get great outcomes. I just reviewed a case series in Mass that's coming out in September of 2 high-level weightlifters who were like borderline international grade for one and actually an international grade lifter in the other. So one is a 54 kilo in the old IWF classes female lifter, and she totaled like 171. And the other was a male in the 94 kilo class at total 304. That's like a 300-pound snatch and 350-pound clean and jerk.
Yeah.
And this was a 28-week case series of them preparing for nationals. And one of them met their target goal, and neither was stronger than their previous best. So can you imagine investing 28 weeks of a complex periodized plan, regimented eating, regimented lifestyle, doing all these things right, and not improving? Well, you have to, because at a certain point, that's what the drawing board is. You might if you run a block as an intermediate and you don't succeed in 4 weeks, you go back to the drawing board, you fix it, and in another 4 weeks, you make progress. The equivalent of that might be half a year or multiple years at a certain level. So that can seem so discouraging as to it not be worth the work to become an advanced person. And that's often how it's framed in the kind of the evidence-based community. Like, sure, okay, if you want to be a competitive bodybuilder and be obsessive and crazy and track all these things, then fine, that's what it takes. But who wants to do that? But the experience of being one of these very high-level bodybuilders is not that you have to tick all these tiny little boxes every single day. It's more so that you've changed your lifestyle. And I think that is the first step, to answer your question more directly, is that you need a paradigm shift in your thinking, that it's not actively doing all these things, but it is living in a way that someone would be able to cultivate those outcomes. So to give some more concrete examples, I eat pretty much the same lunch every day just because I don't go out to eat for lunch. Sometimes we go out to eat for breakfast and sometimes dinner. But when I make my lunch, it's always 2 pieces of fruit, a carrot, a Quest bar, and a can of tuna. Pretty much every day. And that's just what I eat. I don't think about it, Anytime I travel somewhere and I'm going to be gone for 4 to 5 hours, I grab a Quest bar. I don't have to think about it. It's just what I do. And when I make breakfast or take my supplements or eat dinner and all of the habit-based activities that I do, like what I choose when I go out to eat at a restaurant, the things I do when I go to bed, like I put in earplugs, I have blackout curtains, except for a little bit to crack to wake up to the sun. I go to bed at the same time. I have dimmers on my stuff so that it goes, no blue light at a certain point. I try to meditate regularly, and I have reminders on my phone set up for this. I've been training, 4 to 6 days a week for 16 years, and the way I perform movement, some things that I used to have to really, really think about, now I just do. I think all of those things, lifters expect that they need to focus on it, put an emphasis towards it, and really, really spend all their time thinking about it. And I think what you really want to get to is to do all those things without thinking about it, so you can find new stones to uncover. Like some of the things I just mentioned are relatively new. like tracking my sleep on my Fitbit, trying to improve my sleep schedule. In fact, it's only been about 6 or 7 or 8 years that I've really emphasized trying to get my fruit and vegetable intake up, and now it happens automatically. So I've had like once I had that first level of the base built, and I went to the next level of the pyramid. So I'm trying to get to my pinnacle here. I identify, what am I lacking? What are other stones I can unturn? Because I basically, if we use that analogy of the first things you put under the big rocks, which I talked about, that you can get 60, 75% of your gains in a few years, then you start putting in pebbles. Okay, I'm going to take creatine. All right, I'm going to maybe make sure I have peri-workout nutrition. I'm going to maybe actually not just do calories and protein. In certain phases, I'm going to see what macros are best for me. Okay, great, I did that. But now I'm going to integrate that and just kind of eat in that way that shifts me towards being more carb or fat dominant, as an example. I always feel better when I train in the evening or night, or I'm a morning or a late person or whatever. But a lot of it comes down to creating structure. And I think people often confuse flexible diet. Here's one example. Like, flexibility can absolutely exist in the context of structure. The people who struggle the most, in my opinion, with if it fits your macros when they go back to a non-dieting phase are the ones who just freewheel if it fits your macros. Like, every meal, they just kind of figure out what's in the pantry, or they walk down the aisles the Safeway and just kind of pick stuff up. Or, they don't really have set meal patterns or eating behaviors except for these 3 numbers. And I think being able to do that, amazing skill, but that probably shouldn't be where you're at most of the time, because it doesn't create all that stuff I'm talking about, just that kind of automatic behavior. But you can create structured flexibility. Absolutely. You can have systems in place which allow for unexpected changes in life, travel, holidays, etc., and have those elements of flexibility that still allow you to hit all of those pebbles that you're putting into place. And I think then you get to a point where you're kind of at that asymptote phase. I don't think my stage weight's going to go up more than a pound or two next time I compete, which will be like 2023. I think there'll probably be some improvements here and there. And I'm improving in other areas, which we'll talk about, kind of that whole the 1 hour min, if you will. But like, I'm now filling in the sand. And so the sand for me was like, all right, can I get my sleep a little bit better? Okay, well, let's see if I can get my step count up just to be healthier in general. Let's get my resting heart rate down. Let's get make sure I'm actually hitting 4 to 5 servings of fruit and vegetables, which actually the data shows is what you need to really, be healthy enough. And I don't think even most bodybuilders are doing that unless they're in contest prep. So all these things where I'm, really kind of reprogramming my behaviors and my lifestyle that I've had since I was a kid, to now trying to become the person I'm trying to be and live the lifestyle I want. That's a huge part of the journey. So yeah, I think that whole perspective, when I started to think of it that way, all of a sudden everything I did changed, because I was like, I need to offload as many of these things and make them automatic. Like, I'm trying to carry all this around in RAM. It needs to be in my actual hard drive. And then new things can go into RAM before I move them there. So I think that perspective shift is really important. And then, unless you have another question, I want to talk about that kind of thing of bringing up some of those physical qualities. Like you said, I could bench 300 any given day of the week. Yep. If I had a couple weeks, right? So the beauty is that these are things that contribute towards this kind of accumulation of a higher baseline. And I don't have data to support this, but one thing I've noticed is that first-time competitors often lose a lot more muscle mass than second, third, fourth, and fifth-time competitors. I don't know if this is just lower stress levels and better able to manage the process, more consistency, and better auto-regulation, or if it's actually a physiological change where now you've been lifting for 10 years and these adaptations are just going to stick around a whole lot longer, some element of muscle memory and a regression to a mean that is now higher, I do think, at this stage in my life, I've been lifting 16 years, I'm 37. It won't be long before I will have spent more time lifting than not in my life. And you've got to think that, detraining for me is going to look different. I'll detrain to what might be relatively well trained, and I'd have to take a lot of time off to actually fall back. A good example of this is the bench press thing. Like, I've been training purely for Olympic lifting for the last 3 months, and heavily dominant for weightlifting for about the 3 months before that. and I haven't benched in. Actually, so the point of the story is that I did some dumbbell pressing with my feet up yesterday. Because we were on lockdown for this cluster that popped up in New Zealand. I don't have a whole lot of options, and I wanted to do some horizontal pressing. Normally, I just do like flies that put me in a stretch position and some dips because I find they anecdotally don't interfere with my Olympic lifting positions the most, and it's a good way to train my chest still because I'm still interested in bodybuilding. But I said, hey, you know what? I'll go feet up, flat back, full range of motion, dumbbell press. And I hadn't done any horizontal pressing in 3 months. And I picked up 80-pound dumbbells, or the equivalent 36 kilos, and I did 3 sets of 12. And the last one was like a 7 or 8 RPE. And I was like, man, you would think I would have regressed further than that. Like, that's not bad, you know? And in my previous experiences, when I have had an injury, or when I've had to take time off something for a niggle, or when I've been focused on another element of the iron game, I've been noticing that over time, I'm able to get back to where I was faster and faster and faster and faster. This is something Greg Nuckols has talked about because he's had, repeated adductor injuries, and he's had some other injuries, and he had to take a lot of time off for his masters, and he's come back though, and he's like, oh shit, I'm squatting 600 pounds again, So I don't think that's just a genetic outlier thing. I do think that we get so focused on our 1 rep maxes and our optimals and where we are, and we get so fearful of falling back that maybe we're neglecting the fact that we're shoring up weaknesses too. We're not just increasing our strengths. And this broader base that I have as a strength and physique athlete, I think has allowed me to make a lateral move to weightlifting. And when I come back to powerlifting, there's a chance, like in November, which is only like a month after I do Masters Nationals, if everything goes according to plan, I might be able to run like a bench specialization cycle and do some singles on sumo, shift the bar down my back a little bit, and do decently well, maybe even improve in a powerlifting meet. So I think that's the type of thing that is that's a bit of a kind of a parallel to what we're talking about philosophically. That's kind of a metaphor for where you want to get to in terms of your lifestyle and your habits. Like, you want to be able to just be like, oh, you know what? I was a little off my diet, and be able to slip back into having 3 servings of vegetables every day, and having, you go on vacation, no big deal. You do the Hawaii thing or the Cabo thing or whatever, and you come back, and it's easy to come back into it. Not this whole like turning this oil tanker around to kind of go the right direction again, which is expected to happen if you've only been doing this new habit for 3 months and you have to think about it. But if you've been doing the habit for 3 years, 7 years, 10 years, 16 years, the different thing is going on vacation, not eating broccoli.
Eric, we're going to make that trend 1 rep min. Okay, everyone talks about their max, but improving that baseline as it goes up over time. Whew. Now, there are so many great points there, but I have to say, our producer, he was just in my ear the whole time saying, hey, you guys can't say that, where you gave that wonderful analogy of the big rocks, or the basics, mastering the basics, then the little pebbles over time. So everyone just picture a jar right now, and you're putting in the big rocks inside there. That's the fundamentals. The pebbles over time, that's kind of the intermediate things, such as what Eric said, like creatine, or becoming more proficient at certain lifts, becoming stronger, cool. And then over time, you use that word sand to fill in all those missing gaps. And I found out from our producer that where it has sand? Egypt. And apparently they own all sand. And Eric, I don't mean to correct you, but apparently it's not Egypt at Gmail, it's Egypt at hotmail.com, because they sent a very angrily worded email just now about what you said with sand. So just want to note that quick. Sorry.
You know what? I'll see you in court if and maybe we can come to a settlement. You can have sand if I can have the pyramids.
Right. Yeah.
You know what? I think they just open themselves up for a legal argument that they're going to have a tough time defending.
Man, I feel like I'm watching Judge Judy right now, okay? This is what's going on. But no, Eric, I was going to say, when you said the 1 rep min, that's such an interesting way of phrasing it, where I think we're too busy kind of chasing the new best thing, the new horizon that might never come. The sun may never rise again. Like that our last PR, so to speak, if that's all we're ever focused on, right? Rather than, I think someone talked about dedication, desire, discipline. I don't know. Someone might have a coach, but it sounds like good qualities to have, right? But someone made a comment, Eric, that kind of made me think something relatively similar. Well, I posted a recent physique update, and someone said, yeah, but like you haven't improved. Like during this quarantine, it's great that you look basically similar to pre-quarantine. So you didn't get worse. He's like, but you didn't get better. He's like, so why is this a celebration? And I joked with him. I jokingly said, but sometimes not losing, maintaining is in and of itself gaining, right? It is progress in an absolute sense, where this is a new level. Like this is let's say a new best physique, and merely holding on to that, or merely holding on to a new all-time number, being within striking distance, or having that strength is progress. And I think almost that we're chasing that dopamine, that adrenaline that occurs, and we've all experienced that. Okay, I can remember many of my PR celebrations, and so when you don't have that singular moment in your timeline that occurs, that's like kind of a definitive, objective. Boom, I did this. Like, well, what's kind of the point of this? And while you're describing that, Eric, it is absolutely true. Within a few years of lifting, what, 2/3, 3/4 of your lifetime muscular potential you can achieve. So what's the point? But it must be noted, because I was thinking, man, I've heard this company, they sound great, 3DMJ or something. There's this guy, 3DMJ Godfather, Jeff Alberts. And I saw this guy, in person. He was prepping, he wasn't on stage. But you think to yourself, so someone might say they just look at the percentage rather than it being kind of a pyramid, so to speak, or a leveling up game where there's different stratifications here. I'm like, oh, like what, 1/3 left? So you spend 5 years getting 66%, 2/3. But you're going to spend 15 more years getting that 1/3. But there is something interesting about humans. It's just like leanness, where, 10%, Eric, yeah, it looks great. 8%, oh, it looks really good. 5%, woohoo! This is a dramatic, it might just sound like a small shift, but when you see someone, such as yourself, when you're walking down the street, okay, in your large shirt that fits very snug, it must be noted, I was there. I saw the bro side, and it was almost a, what was it? Not a turquoise. It was maybe a teal color top. But it's like, this guy clearly lifts. There is a marked difference between that remaining 15% juice, or 20%, or however far along you are, than just the 2/3. And so I think kind of that nihilism, that's one of our prevalent themes around here. Like, oh, like why bother? So like, yeah, if we talk about ROI, well, it's a great ROI. Lifting is a great ROI for the first few years. You're basically slamming PRs. You're looking better. As long as you're not making critical errors inside of your first 2 to 3 years, you should be looking better and getting stronger, right? So what's the steady either increase or maybe even decline over time? Like, why even do that? And I just think to myself, Eric, I know you did some of that MC work. Anyone that's pursued any other discipline, I personally feel that lifting is one of those great pursuits that can objectively show you that if you invest X amount in this, you will get Y. And it bodes well for other disciplines, because music, as an example, you want to be proficient at the piano, guitar, bass, saxophone, doesn't matter. And you want to really you want to just, you don't want to play hot cross buns. You actually want to play something. You want to play bebop. You want to play something. It's not months. It's not even years. It's a lot of years. And so that path, that reward system, oh, Eric, it gets sad real quick. Where you think that stage, like kind of that stage that intermediates hit, where it's like, am I building muscle? And the answer is yeah. Like your subjective assessment of self is shit, right? Like, which it is for most of us. So like, oh, like I'm not really getting stronger. It's like, well, keep lifting, in a year you will be. It's like, man, for a lot of other disciplines, it's not a year. That's the first 5 years where you're like, I'm still terrible. Why am I doing this? So it just makes me think sometimes when people have that perspective where we want all of it now, and it's granted, again, to take less pressure off the individual, because we have no personal culpability around here, okay? I would say that when you're on social media and you see so many great physiques or strong individuals, and you're like, Eric, this guy's an 83 kilo lifter, same as myself, and he's deadlifting 700 pounds. What's going on here? I get that, but I think sometimes perspective can be very powerful.
No, I totally agree. And I think it's very difficult to look forward and try to relate to someone who's in a very different stage of their journey, if you will, and understand that perspective. I think a lot of that whole ROI perspective is based on your current assessment, and that's just the cognitive biases we have as humans. Like, all we see is all there is. We assess and evaluate our experiences now based on how we feel now. Like, if you took a questionnaire, and we have psychological data to show this, in a bad mood, and it asked you to rate your mood state for the last month, the easy first reaction that's going to come to you, your your initial reaction, and you know where I'm getting this from, Omar?
Where?
Thinking Fast and Slow. Thank
Woo,
you for
Daniel
giving me that
Kahneman.
book.
Woo!
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'm halfway through. So anyway, we have what's called the heuristic replacement, where our when we're cognitively burdened, which is something that we're talking about now, or emotionally strained, we're going to have an initial response, and it's an answer to the easier question that doesn't require our analytical powers. So when you're in a really shitty mood right now, for an acute reason that will probably fade before the day's end, and you're asked, how has your mood been on, say, a questionnaire for the last month? If you don't check yourself and think about it, you're going to answer bad. And that's only a reflection of the last couple hours, maybe the next couple hours. And you have to actively think slow, if you will, and assess, wait, is this reflective of how I've been? So I think the same thing happens when you're frustrated. You're thinking about where you are versus where you want to get and how long it's going to take. And you ask this advanced lifter what they do, and they start to rattle off their lifestyle. And you're like, I don't know if that's worth the ROI. You know, like if I have to keep doing it like this and be this frustrated and make this snail's pace progress, you're assessing that the investment, which is really just a subjective experience of what it feels like to do this, the struggle, is going to be the same 10 years from now. And that's actually what being an advanced lifter is. It's not having a 700-pound deadlift. It's not having an amazing physique. It is having the experience of having a low level of investment to do all of the process-oriented things that result in that outcome that you want. So I don't know if we're just going to talk about the title of this on air, but I feel like something like maybe you're not an advanced lifter, or why you're not an advanced lifter, or what advanced lifters do differently could be a good title based on where we've gotten with this conversation. I don't know what you think about that, Omar, but I'm trying to level up my clickbait game. Am I there?
Eric, let me just say it's beautiful. Some might call it a fall from grace because you were such a purist before and I tainted you. I like to say I brought you down to earth. And so I would say, for anyone that needs, you must watch this film of Werner Herzog, Wings of Desire, and you'll understand Bruno Ganz, exactly what I mean when I said that sometimes it's okay to fall down to earth from heaven. That you...
Just call me Kid Icarus, baby.
Kid Icarus, we're here in the flesh. You are actually, because Eric, you're just a smart boy, you're a smart lad. And normally I objectify you for your great looks, but we're going sapiosexual here now, okay? Just grant me this, okay? Is that all you needed is just a few cues of not marketing, not that you didn't understand marketing. It's that that's not where your mind immediately goes. Those are fantastic titles, and we're doing this in real time. We're totally using one of them because they're excellent. And we had, this is, we'll go on this tangent real quick before going back because there's so many great points about what really an advanced lifter. I think that honestly probably was one of the best definitions I've heard truly of an advanced lifter. You know how they're all those, as we would say, the heuristics are rough approximate. Well, if you have a 3 times, so it's relative body weight 3 times squat. Well, now you're an advanced lifter. It's like, no, that's probably the best definition that scales up because it's true globally, irrespective of how much you're lifting. But real quick, where we were talking about that off air, I made a video just about some of the potential sacrifices as a content creator where you have to be comfortable with some of the titles and all these things. Here's why it's perfect, Eric, what you just did. Because it is descriptive, it's intriguing. So this is kind of like you're perpetually, when it comes to, I'm going to say this, YouTube or a podcast, you're kind of like perpetually on a first date where the person doesn't know if they're interested in you. Like your subscribers do. Your subscribers like, no, I'd date that person. But for everyone else, it's like a blind first date. And so you need a little bit of intrigue and mystery, where it's like the title has to kind of provoke something in you. Not necessarily a FOMO. So maybe you're not an advanced lifter. Whoa, wait a second. I thought I was an advanced lifter. But it's like juxtaposition between what I thought like my worldview and what you're stating. Whew, as long as you, and I would say the caveat, of course, as long as we deliver on the promise. So it's chock full of good information where with my boy, we can't ever miss Egypt, be on the lookout. Because they said, Eric, I didn't want to say it, the other thing they said, because I thought it was not becoming of them. But they said, and I quote, they were going to go all Osiris on your ass. And so I don't know what they meant when they said that. I don't know.
That's not good.
I said, if you want to chop up my boy, back the up, okay? But you nailed that. I think the conversation that I do want to shift right now where you said, like, what is an advanced lifter? You went over kind of some practical recommendations from going from competent, consciously competent to unconsciously competent. Let me ask you this then, because it is sort of that sliding scale, and we don't have to, ratify this. It's not like we have to establish, okay, if you're a so-called beginner to intermediate, like here are the things you need to focus on. But what would you say are some of the key either perception shifts or key qualities that occur that allow that individual to more easily ascend through that process, if that makes sense? So we have maybe, this is just an example. I'm not saying this is what it is, but maybe a beginner lifter, it's like, there's a certain requisite amount of effort. Like you have to have a certain amount of passion. You have to invest into this. From there, we could direct the passion. So it's a kind of cultivating that fire, stoking that fire. Where like for you, it's like, yeah, man, I want to step on that stage. I want to do that meet, like those things. Intermediate. Then we start kind of getting into the science or like where we want to focus it. And then advance is kind of laying the reins off certain things. So you could just go with the flow because you already know what's good. And then attacking maybe with all your fury what you want to pursue at that time. So what does that look like, Eric, so that, someone over the long-term process of being a lifter, they can succeed in what they want to pursue?
Yeah, the great question. I think one big rock, if I was to keep using that analogy, is to maintain process-oriented goals and a process-oriented focus, even in the absence of a goal. And I think that is like there's a lot of people when they have a concrete goal, they can go all in hardcore. But you need to be making sure that doesn't supplant kind of those underlying process-oriented, for the love of the game, quote unquote, type of thing we've always talked about. Great example is Ronnie Coleman, highly competitive, uber focused, especially once he realized he was really good at bodybuilding, at winning the Olympia title. But if you've seen any interview with him, he's had to go through multiple surgeries and deal with all these injuries lately, but he won't stop lifting. His doctors can't keep him out of the gym, and even when he's in excruciating pain, and dealing with that stuff, he was going to lift whether or not he was going to win a Mr. Olympia title. Was he one of the most motivated persons on the planet and never went off his diet and trained hardcore all the way through during contest prep? Yes. But you have to hold that dichotomy, and I don't think that comes naturally, because when you first get into lifting, the process-oriented goals and the external outcome-based goals are both new, and it's very easy for one to supplant the other. And we've talked about that on our episode of motivation that we did way early on in the podcast, how we've got research on this. As soon as you're given an external reward for something you're doing for internal reasons, your intrinsic motivation can fade and your extrinsic motivation can take over. And then once that goal attainment is not there, or is there even, you can kind of have this empty nest feeling, and that can trickle down to your behaviors and even result in burnout. So I think you definitely have to stay in the game to become an advanced lifter, right? So the first thing is to really make sure that you have a deep-seated why, and that you have habits, motivations, and process-oriented focus, which emerges from that. And then you layer on top of that your goal. And you have to kind of accept that sometimes when these goals get disrupted, the external motivation, you may take a hit, but your 1 hour min is so high that it won't be that much of a hit. Like, for example, when our strongman competition, we couldn't do it together. When you couldn't come out to New Zealand because of COVID and that got canceled, my training was kind of shitty for a couple weeks. But the point is, my training was shitty. I didn't not train. I was still in the gym 5 to 6 days a week. I was less motivated and sometimes didn't even want to train when I was just working at my apartment gym doing handstand push-ups and playing with 24-kilo dumbbells and bands.
Yeah.
But I still trained because the idea of actually not training was so foreign to me and felt so weird that when I take time off training, it is because I'm really stressed. Like, it would be a bad idea. Like, it would be contrary to my goal to train, and that's pretty rare that my life is, that variable or something has acutely happened emotionally or something, whatever. So I think that's that first piece is you need to have a strong underlying commitment that has emergent habits from that. That's probably one of the most important steps. And I think, from there, it's going to become very, very context specific for the individual. But, the habits that are built on top of that need to encompass everything from creating an overall environment for you to achieve your goal, which includes stress management, sleep habits, structure to your eating, healthy eating habits, regular activity, and all that stuff. And then, training that fits in with that as well and is specific. I think also having an appropriate mindset of what is a reasonable time frame for you to achieve your goals and being able to change that as you advance, understanding that asymptote, which just for those who don't know what the hell that means, maybe English isn't your first language, it's basically the closer you get to the goal, the more that curve starts to flatline. So there's diminishing returns, but it never actually fully flatlines for reasons of being unable to make progress per se, but more so because you become too advanced in age, you accumulate injuries, you just run out of time before you can create that same environment. For a male, maybe your testosterone levels are really actually 1/5 of what they were. You were like 59, 60 now or something like that. Or you've had, some serious damage to a joint, or it's just very difficult to train it no matter how creative you are. Something like that. Life gets us all. So I think all of those factors kind of all hinge on that core piece, and they kind of branch out into those various lifestyle things of creating that environment. Another thing I think is really important, a really great benefit to offloading things from being in that conscious competence, cognitive burden phase, and then becoming these things you just do, these lifestyle habits, is that it gives you a reserve of energy. I've talked about this a lot, how being able to flip that switch and go hardcore, play that hardcore card, go to failure, get an eye bleed in the middle of a squat, go on 1,400 calories for a few weeks because that's just what you got to do, and still live life. That's a card you want to have in your pocket. It's not a card you want to have on the table all the time so that everyone can see what you're playing, and you're going to lose that hand. Having that card is so important because arguably to make some of these high-level achievements and advancements, you may need to play it. The amount of volume you need to push, or the amount of singles at a high RPE that you have to push to increase it, or the amount of time you have to give effort to commit and be focused on and be in a surplus for might be years and a level of focus that you're just not used to. It's the same way. I wasn't prepared for my PhD because it's a 3-year goal, just like I wasn't prepared for my master's, which was a 1-year goal. When you take classes, you got a semester. So in each one of those phases, I faced challenges, and then I became used to the idea that I had to plan and stay committed and stay focused to some requisite degree and manage my pacing for these extended goals, and that extends to lifting. So I think if whatever your plan is requires this exhausting, redlining level of effort, that's not sustainable, but it doesn't always have to be. You have to have that card because there will be blocks and periods of time, to put it really concrete. An advanced lifter may have to go through a high volume block that looks kind of ridiculous compared to what they've done previously to see the needle move over a short-ish time frame. To make intermediate-like gains, that advanced lifter may have to do 2 to 3 times the workload that they did as an intermediate to get that same progress over that same rate of time, if they don't want to see it slow, if they have a competition goal in mind. Overreaching is not even necessary when you're a novice. It may be for someone who's more advanced, or at least the overall experience and investment may be very high if we're talking about that ROI kind of perspective. So I think being able to have reserve is important. Like you talked about, maintenance is sometimes a win. And what I would say is that for an advanced lifter, you're going to go through some hot spots, hot spells, where things are great and you experience kind of this non-linear progress, and then you plateau for a long period of time. And I think sometimes when you're plateaued, it's okay just to hang out there and gather your resources and kind of reset the system and get ready to then push again to hopefully get one of those hot spells again, instead of burning out yourself when things are just not clicking. If it's not clicking, sometimes it's just not. And it's okay. Just ease off the gas and get to a place where you're mentally and physically ready to go hard to try to get in a little spurt of growth, or add just a kilo to your total. So I guess have the ability to play the card, but don't have it out. Have reserve so that you can push it, and then make sure you're offloading as much as you can into that lifestyle-based habits. And then you can turn over those few leaves that are left, those few stones, so you can build that foundation to get that spire ever higher.
The citadel of iron, that some might say. Whew.
Indeed.
Eric, so much power there. No wonder you're a power lifter. We're going to talk right now about the thing you said, the lifestyle habits, because I must say, sometimes there can be that silver lining. And what I'd say for potentially advanced lifters, or those that are headed towards that direction, is often you possess enough knowledge, and it's not the training program you're not on that's preventing you from, reaching that next level. It might be something you already know, but you're not currently applying. And I'll give just two brief examples. One very positive thing I've done over the last year, after speaking actually with Eric, and you shared something that you do when you train. I think we like to work, we like what we do, and so we like to work a lot. And I have that naive notion that, oh, well, I'm training. Yeah, man, just firing off an email in between sets. Well, I'm being productive. Eric, now it's not just about me training and being in my happy place. Like, I'm firing off emails. I'm probably being more. That's simply not true, right? It's a myth that we tell ourselves. We want to feel busy because we're uncomfortable not moving towards the greater goals we have that are outside of the gym. So we make this excuse. And so you're on your phone, and no matter what, even if you're really good at multitasking or separating that work from your training, it's going to have a detrimental effect on the quality of your training. And so it wasn't the program that I was missing that I said, oh man, like Eric, 4x8, it had to be a 5x8. Buddy, that extra set killed my progress in 2019. It's like, instead, let's double back down, because I said that, and it's not an exaggeration. I would say that you and Alberto Nunez, are two of the most dedicated lifters I've seen when lifting in person. And again, when people think dedication, they might think like slapping themselves full of chalk and, getting hyped up like, yep, which is honestly, that might be more of an indication that you're scared of what you're about to pursue. And so you're almost trying to build up within yourself the belief that you can do it. No, what I saw with them was just a laser-like focus, right? So you could be off your set, just chilling. When it's time to do the set, you're applying yourself. And that sounds very simple until you think whether or not you're doing it. And so I could say personally now, just speaking things that I think have had a very large impact on my training recently, and things that I guess you could say I already sort of knew but did not apply. And so it wasn't a missing piece of knowledge, it was a missing piece of experience, applying that knowledge into the experience. Would be the quality of lifting. So then just kind of turn that off. We're airplane mode, just bumping the beats. And so really focusing. And we oftentimes talk about enjoying the process, but then also how, yeah, if you're goal focused too, so you're process oriented, but also, man, you want to squat that 500, that individual session, it might not be the bee's knees. You might not go in there like, oh my God, this is a great session. But even still, I would counter that the process of the lifting in the hour and a half, 2 hours you're doing, you should at least somewhat enjoy it. And so that brought back my enjoyment, where I could be singular in that pursuit in that moment very quickly. And then the other one I'd say, and this was a pause for reflection, because I know Eric will basically never say no to me. And I forget what I told Eric a year ago, where Eric knows, like, I have a few businesses that I run. I would say I'm busy. I would say Eric is quite a busy man himself. And I forget, like, we're just talking about something. I said, well, how about we do this? And it basically would have been just more work, a certain amount of work, though. It would have been, let's say, like, for 2020, probably would have been a couple hundred hours of work, or like something, not a small amount, but not insurmountable, but definitely something that you need to consider. And Eric's like, man, I'm actually trying to simplify my life, where everything I choose is like, I have to decide, do I think I'd be ready to do this a year from now, not even in this present moment? And I was so used to Eric obviously saying yes to everything, that it took until the pandemic to hit for me to start re-examining kind of my business practices, not what I did, but where I chose to invest my time and how to better manage some of the stress that would creep up. Because I am one of those people that if I have a goal, not lifting, but outside, let's say it's like a financial goal, or I want to achieve X result, I'm kind of thinking about it and working on it. Until I achieve it, I'm uncomfortable because I'm not where I want to be. And there's a certain time investment where it could be a poor ROI. So like between let's just say 45 hours and 65 hours. It's like the first 45 might bring you 90% there. The remaining 20 hours, so to get a 65 hours or what have you, it might bring you an extra 10%. But if we start balancing that, like the quality of life, how you're enjoying things, the moment, man, it makes a big difference. And I could say, like, that's once again getting in the mood. So now that I was training with my brother in the backyard, and I also had access to basically, let's say, a garage-like facility to train. But while I was in the backyard, phone was away. We're just playing tunes, getting in the training, and then because we're home so often, trying to foster a more positive home life experience, stress went down. And man, it's a crazy kind of feedback loop, Eric, when that happens. Stress goes down a little bit, your enjoyment over the process, you're starting to notice, like, wait a second, like, man, am I seeing changes without even really, I'm not thinking I need to lose 5 pounds, but the body kind of naturally, with the choices, I'm snacking maybe less, like I'm not thinking about these things, it naturally kind of tends to gravitate towards a better self. And so I could say for me, kind of echoing what you said, the lifestyle habits, sometimes you already know what you should be doing, but you don't know the impact it'll have until you implement it, you know?
No, that's well said. In keeping with the theme of progression, I think this is probably the last thing I've got to say
Yep.
is that I think sometimes people will see the output in one's life, in your life, especially if they're learning from you, and they don't necessarily see the progression to get there. So you were talking about, how we had that conversation about how I put my phone on airplane mode because I want to be intentional and present while training because I saw the detriment of it. It's an important piece that because I saw the detriment of it, which means that, despite the fact that I'm motivated, I'm a lifer and I have these goals and I have this perspective and this philosophy, it does mean that I, at times, have failed at doing what I know to be the best. And I think this happens to everybody, like you were saying, that this is something where it's not the next program, it's not the quick change to your macros. It is actually being present and intentional with what you know you already should be doing, but you're not great at. And that's the thing about lifestyle modifications is our lives change, and the society we live in changes in ways we can't predict. Like having Instagram on my phone, having notifications, having a smartphone. I didn't have the tools built up to let that not distract me. I used to be very focused, and then I thought, oh, this is great, and we have this free marketing tool. We can all have our own platform, double-edged sword. I'm also, like you were, trying to deal with all these extra things in my business that came as a consequence of that. And that went in parallel with my personality, which is to say yes, and which is to take on more, which is to do. And, one thing I got to give a shout out to Andrea Valdez is that she kind of said this, and it really made a new perspective shift in my mind. And it's something I'm continually working on, and I'm better, but certainly not succeeding, is understanding that when you say yes to something, there's always an opportunity cost. You're saying no to other things that you don't even know. And I had said in that conversation we were talking about where I said, no, I can't add that. I'm trying to simplify. I had said yes to so many things in combination with social media that I felt the need, the obligation to be on my phone all the time. And that had trickled down effects with my relationship and my workouts. And I would hold the phone. Like now my priorities are out of whack. So learning to say no because I'm thinking about all the opportunity costs and the way it could affect the things that are core to what I'm trying to achieve, that has been a journey. That has been a progression. And it's something that I'm always struggling with and trying to get better at. So I think it's just really good to kind of do audits. I think is probably the take-home message here is, yeah, you have your mission. Yeah, you have a lifestyle. Yeah, you set up all these things, but it's kind of a living animal. Just like your life changes, your body changes, who you are changes, and the society you live in changes. That means you're going to have an agile system as you create all these different elements of habits that we talked about. They need to have that agility so that they can realign themselves with your goals in context to the way your life has changed.
Eric, what more needs to be said? Okay. I think you just opened a can of whoop ass on everyone here. You came up with the title that just cemented everything, and it's going to cause that existential dread that then we're going to fix inside the episode. And so now in real time, people, while listening to this, they could sense, you know what? Maybe things are going to be okay. Maybe we will achieve the goals that we set out. And maybe the only final thing I will say is that often when I reflect on my lifting journey, I try to remember my initial self, like kind of to stay true to the vision of myself that I had as, let's say, a young man in the future, if that makes sense. So the goals might shift, but the character building qualities, what I would like to be like and how that manifests itself, that's kind of what I tend to go back. And in a way, while the goal might change superficially, the intent behind it, that self betterment or trying to move forward, remains the same. And that's why it's cool, man. Like I said, to see you pursue all these things like the weightlifting, and there's all these people. Once again, it's like, well, like why would you do weightlifting if like you're starting it now at this point and like you could never compete in like whatever the IWF represent your country? I'm like, you're missing everything right now. So to see you do it on a big level, I think is exactly how you should be leading by example. And I think because we're both lifers, we're basically slowly convert. Like there's people listening to this, Eric, that we know. We just look at them in the eyes and they have that 1,000 mile stare. I'm like, oh, this guy's in it. This guy or gal, like they're all the way in it. But there's a certain portion of people like we're converting. Okay, we're converting them to Draperism, and that's a great feeling.
Absolutely. Join the cult. You won't regret it when the end times come. And it's just us and the blonde bomber against Paimon fighting over the pyramids. You know what I'm saying? With the lizard overlords raining fire and destruction around us.
Yeah.
And it's essentially a Lovecraftian themed War of the Worlds moment with hunky man and woman flesh all over the place. That's us leading the end times revolution to where we get to exist and have our heads.
Eric, if HBO doesn't pick up this shit, this is a travesty. I'm just saying. Okay, I just want to say that publicly.
I'll even take like Cinemax or Showtime, like just any contract, because some of the other things we talked about have fallen through.
Yeah,
did not email us back.
Oh yeah,
it's their loss, of course. But I'm just saying we have availability. Hit us up. Egypt, not you.
Eric, before I wrap it up, my friend, I will just say this is the problem when I'm dealing with someone who's also a principled person. I'm not going to say what happened, but Eric and myself, this is a true story, and this is just at the end, so I can share this. We were propositioned, let's say, by a large corporation that is worth several $1 billion, someone representing them, to join some sort of program. And we basically just thought of ourselves, there would be some sacrifices in terms of we could only be on one platform, blah, blah, blah. And they were expecting us, Eric, to jump at the opportunity. It's like, so it's not HBO, but let's say HBO is like, hey, we're starting a podcast platform. We want you on. Like, you'd be foolish to say, no, this is HBO. Like, Disney approaches you and says, hey, guy, like, move from YouTube, come to our new Disney streaming. Sounds like a great opportunity. And we both just talked after him like, no, we're good. And they weren't expecting that. And we said it over the phone. And so the guy was like, yeah, I'll send a follow-up email, but I don't think he's used to getting rejected. And so it just completely shattered the rest of the conversation.
There was no follow-up email. I think we can leave it at that.
That.
It definitely felt like when you were talking about how, you go on a first date. Now, I haven't dated in 16 years.
Right.
But, when they say, I'll call you, and that absolutely means you're never going to hear from me again.
Right.
I felt a little bit like that, I'm just saying.
And then we spoke to each other after where we said, no, you're worth it. Like, Eric, I want you to know something.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were both each other's overly encouraging friend who helps us, live in our denial, which I appreciate. It's the best place to live personally.
To live in our own shared fantasy. Whew.
And that's, to be clear, not live on denial, like the Nile, okay? I don't need another frickin' email.
Yeah.
But living in denial, all right, Egypt? Ease up.
Yeah, we're bringing Atlantis on their ass, okay? Because we're going ancient civilization. We know the Earth is only 7,000 years old, but no, not even Atlantis. Ancient Lemuria, okay? We're going even pre-Atlantis. So Eric, Cthulhu, he's on speed dial. We got this. Now,
hey, man.
Quick question.
He's sleeping. Don't wake him up. Oh, it's not going to go well.
Yeah, he's a light sleeper. When he awakens, it's over. So
his dreams cause problems. So go ahead.
Eric, is there anything you want to circle back to before we wrap this up that you just feel, we had, what is lovely is we hash out very briefly. We're like, yeah, what do we want to talk about? And then it just flows. And by the end of it, at least, once again, my subjective experience, I think it's a fire episode. So is there anything you want to come back to?
Honestly, if you keep polishing something that's already perfect, you're just going to scuff it. Yep. So I think we are solid.
Yeah.
Omar, where can people find you?
Whew. Not in Egypt, but they can find us right here on the interwebs every damn Monday. And look, we read a review. We'll try and we're not just going to read the 5-star ones. Shout out to my boy Myron. We'll read all of them, okay? We don't know when, but go ahead on iTunes, leave a rating and a review. It helps on YouTube. If you leave a comment, we will do our best to respond, which was cool. Actually, Eric, Terrence Ruffin, who was on the podcast last, he actually was interacting with people on his episode, which shout out to him, I thought was super cool. And then just a final bit of housekeeping. I do have to correct myself because I am that person that loves the cinema. When I said Wings of Desire, Bruno Gantz, those are absolutely correct. You need to see that when I made the angelic reference. The director was not the German director Werner Herzog, who is fantastic. You should watch Fitzcarraldo or Aguirre Wrath of God. You should watch instead. It was Wim Wenders is the director of Wings of Desire. Just for the one person, Eric, that gets it, but it actually, when you say, like, let's say, like, you said, like, my powerlifting total, like, someone's like, it was a 412 Wilks, and it actually is 411. I had to state it was 411, otherwise it'd bother me.
You know what, while we're here.
Yeah.
So we just had Terrence Ruffin on.
Yes.
And there was either 1 or 2 points in the conversation where I called him Tony. You might have heard it.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I called him Tony is not because Tony is short for Terrence, because it's absolutely not. It's short for Antonio. Terry would be short for Terrence. However, there is another very, very good bodybuilder named Tony Ruffin, who was a mid and late 2000s WNBF lightweight competitor who was often in the top 10 at WNBF Worlds, always in shape, always on point. So if, Terrence, you're listening, I called you Tony just because I had other great bodybuilders in my mind. Yeah. No disrespect, same last name, and I just want to make that that error correction for the record as well. Apologies to both Tony and Terrence. If you're out there, if you're listening, keep doing the damn thing.
Eric, you're so silly, because here's the thing. I actually made a mistake. I'm going to state publicly he didn't make a mistake in the last episode, but he just knew. He's like, he saw his friend make a mistake, so he's like, let me pretend I made a mistake so I could fall on the same sword with you, and that's just you, bro. Bless your heart and soul. I look forward to lifting at the Citadel of Iron, the Iron Citadel, soon. We are back every single Monday from now until the end of time, until Egypt decides to step up. So we'll catch everyone then.